I'm Jessica Parker. This is my sign name. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I'm a CODA. I grew up very involved in the deaf community and deaf culture. I graduated high school and I went to college and studied ASL to become an ASL teacher. I taught a variety of things. I taught children, high school, college, hearing, deaf, children, adults, really all levels. I moved to Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska, and I've lived here for about 12 years now, and I love it. I work as a principal of a school here. So I have been working on my PhD. I transferred to an EDD for over 10 years. It was a very challenging experience for me. I have children and I'm working full time, so very, very busy, lots of responsibilities. It was a very long time for me to finish, but I did it. And this presentation is it's a data presentation from my dissertation. Okay, are you ready? The title is Teaching Deaf Students American Sign Language, a qualitative, phenomenological, that word's hard to spell, a study. Okay, so qualitative, that means that there's no numbers to calculate. You can't measure it based on numbers. It's not a math based. It's really experiential interviews, conversations with others, gathering that data, reading through it, coding it, that. Phenomenological, that means experiences. So I asked questions of the deaf educators from all over the US. And I was like, tell me about your experiences about teaching deaf children. What happened? What is the good, the bad, the plus, the minuses? Give me your experiences. Okay, so I successfully defended my dissertation last year. So very proud of that. And so now I'm Dr. Jessica Parker. Okay, are you ready? You want to hear about my data? Of course you do. So come on, let's go. So here's the agenda. I will be, of course, introducing this project, explaining a few terms, going over the background of the project. What is the problem? What is my purpose? What is the significance? The why? I have research questions, 2 of them, and a theoretical foundation framework. I have a summary of literature. There was a lot of reading from years past research, the research procedures and rules that I followed, and of course the analysis. I'll explain the background of the people that I interviewed, the questions I asked, who were these people? And the data, that's my favorite part, the data presentation. And finally, after I've gathered all this data, I myself analyzed it, and what do we do next with this data? So I provided some recommendations of how we can improve deaf ASL literacy. Also, the last part I share, it's your turn. So what are you going to do? And then, of course, I'll share my email address and contact information. Okay, are you ready? Introduction. Deaf children, they have limited access to ASL literacy, reading and writing. We already knew that, really. Many studies and research articles, when I read, they said the same thing. Deaf children struggle. Most deaf children are born from hearing families that don't sign. There's 90% of deaf are born to hearing families. Also, if the deaf students do not pick up the language, they don't have a foundation to learn the other languages like math or science or history. So they never improve or develop. Why? because they are language deficient, and ASL, which is the most important language for them. Okay, here's some different terms. Bilingual, that means you know 2 languages. Most of the time in the deaf world, it's English and ASL. If it's a deaf school, bilingual means that they teach both English and they teach ASL. Sometimes total communication or going back and forth. There's a lot of different ways. Big D deaf, that means that babies who are born deaf, maybe they have a deaf family that signs to them and they grow up and they're immersed in the deaf world and deaf culture and they have deaf identity. Many times it happens later in life. L1 means it's their first language. A baby who is born, if it's deaf, the parents are L1 language, they're deaf, that's an L1 language. L2 means it's a second language. Most of the time, English or ASL for deaf children. Small d deaf means it's usually a medical. Many times when a baby is born, deaf baby, to hearing parents, it is a small d deaf. Later in life, maybe, if they go to a deaf university, they envelop a deaf identity and they learn about ASL and learn how to sign and hang out in the deaf community. They become big D deaf because they have deaf identity within themselves. They're proud to be deaf. So that's the difference. Immersion means deaf go to a school with a teacher who signs and they pick up the language naturally. There is no direct teaching, it's just natural picking it up. Mainstreaming means like a deaf person is put into a hearing classroom with an interpreter, and the teacher most of the time is hearing and they speak with an interpreter who signs. So the information, it has to be translated from English into ASL. That's typical mainstreaming. All right. Background. Sorry, it's hard to see. Okay, deaf children who do not have access to ASL or other languages. They can't learn English. They have limited access to language. If you read a lot of the research, all of it says the same thing. Oh yeah, ASL is very beneficial to the deaf. Well, duh, we already knew that. Yeah, ASL is a big benefit. And there's not enough curriculum out there. I've searched. Maybe hearing curriculum, yeah, there's some, but deaf curriculum, no, it's just not there. And without the understanding of how deaf children can access language or how to find and develop ASL curriculum, the deaf, they'll never develop. It'll stay the same. They will never improve. So the time is now. We must do something. Come on. Okay, so what is the problem? The problem is deaf children do not have access to language, ASL literacy. That means receptive and presenting, signing. They have limited access. What is the goal, the purpose? The goal is to gather data from you, skilled deaf educators. You have experience. So my goal was to bug you guys and chat with you and please beg different people to be involved in my research project. And I gathered all this up. There was 209 people that were involved in this research, so I'm very proud of that. So my goal is to gather this data from skilled people like you. Okay, so what is the why? Why are we doing this? What's the importance? What for? Well, we already know that the hearing and the deaf are, there's an academic gap. So we have to do something. We have to help the deaf bring up that academic gap, and they're equal. So they have equal access to language. And we need to know what are some good strategies. We need to know how to develop ASL curriculum for the deaf. We need to improve language skills among the deaf students. Okay, so I have two research questions. The first one, how is ASL literacy being taught? My focus was kindergarten through 5th grade. I asked deaf educators only, only the ones that had certification, how do you teach ASL to deaf children? What do you do? The second question, if we worked on writing an ASL curriculum for deaf, what would it look like? We need deaf ASL curriculum. Okay, you have to have a theoretical framework established. It's like a lens, like glasses. So I have 3 different glasses. The first one is the student. The student learns how. The second is big D deaf. It was important to have people that I interviewed that it was very important that most of them were deaf. I wanted my interviews to be in ASL. I wanted authentic data, real, true, accurate data. So big D, deaf lens. And the last lens was a research lens, of course. This is a research study, and we have to follow the scientific process. And I want this study to mean something for future. That was my goal. It is required that you have to read and research older literature from 5 years past. So what did the literature say? Well, there was limited research. I searched and searched and searched, and it was really hard to find. But there was a few similarities. A lot of research about cochlear implants and the benefits of bilingual education. There was a lot of information about using visuals and how beautiful the ASL language is, of course. There was many studies about how there's deaf children have ASL deficiencies, which we already knew. The challenges of deaf education, that was interesting. The diversity of deaf children, that was very true. You know, some have implants and some don't. Some have deaf parents, some have hearing parents. Some have other disabilities. Some speak, some sign. So they're very diverse learners. Different, very different. Other similarity, there was a big need for ASL literature, ASL resources. There's not a lot out there. We need assessments. There's not many. We need to know about strategies, recommendations. They're limited. We need literature, poetry. There's a lot, but if you compare English to ASL, there's not a lot. We need more. Early exposure of language to deaf children is a plus. We already knew that. And it's important to have deaf role models, yes. So very interesting. Okay, this is my research procedures. First, I started with a survey, a list of questions. I had 15. I created the questions both in English and in ASL, and I made sure that the translation was accurate. I had a team of people that, analyzed my signing and made sure that my English was accurate and clear. And then the survey was disseminated all over to the 50 states in the United States. I contacted and reached out to, it was during early 2020, and 209 people responded to my survey. Wow. All of them had a deaf education certification. All of them had experience teaching deaf children, grades kindergarten to 5th grade. Then I established some focus groups, different groups, deaf, hearing, mixed, all deaf educators. And I had a list of questions, and I would ask them a question. I would sign it to them, and they would lead the discussion. It was really wonderful to see all of the dialogue going back and forth, and I just kind of sat back and watched them talk. I had a video camera set up, and later my job was to translate the focus group conversations into English. And then I had to send all of the translations to the participants to approve their signing to make sure it was accurate. I also set up some interviews one-on-one. Same process. I videotaped it. Then I translated it into English, typed it out. I sent it to the participants, make sure they approved my translation. Oh, and then came the fun part, the data analysis. I took all of this data. Oh, sorry, hold on a second. I took all of this data. It was a huge stack, and I coded it. I read through it. I was looking for some, patterns, some similarities, some things, some keywords or phrases, themes. That was really fun. It was a fun part. And then the last part is this data presentation. Okay, the background of who I asked questions of. Well, everyone had a deaf education certificate. They had experience teaching deaf ed kids. Some had a BA degree, 73% had a master's degree, and 7.6% had a PhD or doctorate degree. You can see the variety of experience of years. It's pretty varied from new to old to many, many years. But something I'm very, very proud of is the people who I interviewed. It was very important that they were deaf, big D deaf. My goal was 50%. I was not successful, but 32% of all of the people that were involved, the 209 people that were involved, were deaf. Also, the focus groups, the interviews, 60% of the communication was purely sign. Okay, so how is ASL taught? The number one answer was immersion. They didn't directly teach, but immersion. The deaf would sit in a deaf education classroom and the teacher would sign, yes, but there wasn't like a specific direct ASL teaching. 16% had direct, specific ASL teaching. 13% had no ASL instruction. And 13% had some one-on-one, like maybe an ASL specialist or tutoring. It was very interesting that most of them were immersed. So then I asked, okay, most of you said that deaf children are immersed, so what do you think? What are the positives or the negatives of that? Do you think that's enough? Is immersion enough, or is it satisfactory? And most of them said, 71% responded, what? The deaf need direct ASL instruction taught. They need lessons that are specific. They need to learn the ASL history and culture and language and grammar. It needs to be, literature and poetry. It must have it. So how should ASL be taught? The number one answer was that direct ASL. Intentional. It means, emphasis on direct teaching. The next answer was we need deaf and ASL role models in the classroom. That's very important. The deaf, big D deaf, are beautiful signers, and they need to show deaf students who watch them how to sign. Grouping deaf students by similar levels. Teaching ASL grammar, culture, and history alongside the language. Teaching advanced vocabulary words, academic language, and partnering with staff and parents. Okay, so what kind of materials are deaf educators using? "24% signing videos. They show the students and they watch different videos online. 20% said that they make their own curriculum. They write out lessons, they create. That takes a lot of time. 17% use L2 curriculum. That means hearing curriculum like Signing Naturally or Master ASL or True Way. Hearing ASL curriculum. Very interesting. And 16% said they use just visual pictures, and maybe they make PowerPoints and have the students visually watch. 12% use modified hearing curriculum. What is needed in an ASL curriculum? In a perfect world, see, I'm holding my magic wand in my hand. I have it. And poof, I have created ASL curriculum for deaf children. Here it is. Tell me what it looks like. And deaf educators, the number one response was more of it. We need more of it, please, please. We're begging you, please, we need more. Signing videos from different deaf standards. We need standards. We need to include grammar, culture, history, alongside the vocabulary. We need ASL literature. We want a parent portion. Maybe something for them to bring home and show their mom, hey, the two of us can learn together. A parent portion. Lots of visuals. Less English, more ASL. Okay, wow. Wonderful information. I agree with them. Really, I do. I mean, it's right there. Okay, so after I finished gathering all of this data, now what do we do with it? So I have some recommendations, 5 of them. The first is we need direct, specific, intentional, emphasized, intentional, planned out ASL instruction. Make it part of the Deaf Ed day, maybe Fridays, 1 hour block. At this specific time, we're going to teach ASL. We'll have an ASL lesson. We need more deaf, big D deaf, in the classrooms. We need them to be training the deaf educators. We need more deaf leaders too. The third thing we need to not forget to teach culture, grammar, history. It's not only about the language. It's grammar, culture, and history, and language. The fourth thing is we need to partner and support our staff, our principals, our parents. I know most parents, their signing skills are lacking or they have none. We want to be careful not to judge them or look down on them. Shame on you. Instead, we should partner with them and support them and help them. Partner together. Hey, I'll teach you how to sign. Give them some resources and some easy ways for them to improve and work on their ASL skills. And the last thing is we need to think and change our mindset for the deaf to have higher thinking. Use big words, teach specific terminologies for like biology. There's many videos online that has, biology signs that are really specific. So we should be teaching those higher level vocabulary words and teach them how to sign that. Why? Well, it helps them improve their English skills too. Okay, now it's your turn. You are the leaders. So we should be encouraging and training our leaders. You contact your principal, show them this research. Tell them to look, ASL is important. We must teach deaf kids ASL every day, an hour every day, or something like that. So it's up to you to bug and contact your leaders. Let's take some action. Number 2, we need curriculum. We should be reaching out to Don Sign Press or Sign Media, or maybe you. TPT, Teachers Pay Teachers. You can make some money yourself. I know you already make ASL curriculum. You have it on your computer, on your laptop. You have it. So why not sell it and share it with the world? We need more ASL curriculum for the deaf. And you, number 3, we need research. Go and get your PhD degree and write a dissertation, complete a focus on deaf studies or something. Write newspaper articles, magazine articles, and send them to different organizations. It's your responsibility to improve your field by helping to develop research. And number 4 is stakeholders. That means you, me, the community, parents, principals, everyone has a responsibility to partner and work together to develop the improvement of ASL literacy for deaf children. Okay, finally, you'll see I have my list of references. Also, my contact information. You can see my email address, my website, my Facebook. You can even read my entire 200-page dissertation. Please look at it. It's interesting. I'm very proud of it. So please reach out to me. I encourage you it's your turn now. Help me. Let's partner together to help improve ASL literacy in deaf children, okay? Thank you. Bye.